Hi everybody! I want to tell you about the longest railway line in the world, the Trans-Siberian Railway from Moscow to Beijing on board the SARS Gold private train. I specify that this is a private train because there are other trains, commuter trains, that are also available for this journey. In my opinion, this would be the safest and most comfortable way to make this journey. The experience on board is like a river cruise. It's very comfortable. There's great food, great service, excellent excursions, and tours planned every day. There are even a few nights where we spend in a hotel. And it's nice to break up the trip a little bit, because on regular scheduled trains, you might go non-stop for a few days straight without getting off. I've heard from many travelers that this is on their bucket lists and this is a once-in-a-lifetime experience that they must do. But this is the kind of trip that many travelers talk about doing, but very few actually do. A journey like this is an approach to travel that emphasizes connection to local people, cultures, food, and music. It is intentional and it is immersive. It relies on the idea that a trip is meant to educate and have an emotional impact. Part of the reason of this is that it's not the easiest trip to organize. There are strict visa rules and complex flight requirements, especially flying into Europe and then returning from Asia. So let me whet your appetite and share with you my experiences from being caught in the middle of Moscow Day celebrations, to swimming in the icy waters of Lake Baikal, to spending a night in a Mongolian yurt.
So I was fortunate enough to be part of this journey that brought us through Russia, Mongolia, and China. The Trans-Siberian Railroad is the longest railroad in the world. Our trip crossed 7 time zones and covered over 7,000 kilometers. But technically the journey I took was the Trans-Mongolian, as I went from Moscow to Ulaanbaatar and on to Beijing, instead of from Moscow to Vladivostok. As I mentioned, this was not a basic commuter train where we would spend a number of days non-stop on the train. This was actually a private train for tourists, and it was organized very much like a river cruise, where we had a number of stops and excursions every single day. I also had some nice overnight stays at hotels during the journey, so it was a nice way to break up the train journey like that. It was quite funny when I left Toronto. As you know, when you go through the airport, there are document checks and so on, and they usually ask you where you're going, what you're doing there, yada yada yada. So when I said I was going to Moscow and then going on the Trans-Siberian Railway, the reaction was, "Oh, you're part of that group." It was like everyone knew I was coming through. I just thought that was pretty cool that this kind of trip does draw some notice. I spent 2 nights in Moscow at the Intercontinental Hotel. Then I had the opportunity to visit some great UNESCO World Heritage sites like the Kremlin, the Red Square, St. Basil's Basilica. Everything was amazing, and it was really cool to be able to go out for a walk at night and explore the city, and also to ride the famous Moscow Metro. It is absolutely one of the most beautiful and unique subway systems in the world. It's been called the best museum in Moscow. It's so beautiful that 44 stations are listed as cultural heritage sites. Also, something really cool happened at the Kremlin. I was stopped by armed security, both uniformed and plainclothes, though, and immediately I was wondering, what did I do wrong, and if I'm headed to Russian jail? And then I look up and I see Putin's motorcade drive by right in front of us, maybe about 30 feet from me. And I was told that Putin was actually in that motorcade because the presidential flags were flying on his limo, as well as above the Kremlin where they were headed. So that was, I thought, a pretty cool thing to see at the Kremlin. Moscow is such a fascinating and amazing city. You can easily spend more than 2 nights here. But after my 2 nights in Moscow, I was excited to get on the train. I arrived at the Kazan station and was greeted with a champagne reception and live band welcoming all our guests for boarding. This really set the tone for the excitement that would be my Trans-Siberian adventure. As we headed on our way, our first stop was Kazan, a city about 150 years older than Moscow. Kazan has a very interesting mix of cultures, as it's a center of both Muslim and Russian Orthodox cultures. And it was really cool to see the Kol Sharif Mosque in the Kazan Kremlin, one of the largest mosques in Russia. The mosaics, the ornaments, and the calligraphy inside were just absolutely stunning. After spending a day exploring Kazan, we headed to Yekaterinburg. I was very surprised at how modern and clean the city was. It could have been any European city. There were a few buildings reminiscent of the Soviet era, but for the most part, it seemed like a very cosmopolitan city. I even picked up a Starbucks mug. I don't think many people have this particular one, so for any of you collectors out there, I'll let this go to the highest bidder. And also, just outside the city lies the geographic border between Europe and Asia. And it was really nice to be greeted by a champagne toast and a mini concert with traditional Russian instruments. So it was a lot of fun here. We had a bit of a celebration here right at the border marker between Europe and Asia. I then stopped in the town of Irkutsk, and the highlight here was actually being able to have a home-cooked meal at a local family's home. They served plenty of delicious local foods as well as some homemade liquor. I have no idea what was in it, but I'm pretty sure it made me stronger. Then before getting onto the ferry out to Lake Baikal to rejoin the train, we had a stop in Lysvyanka fish market to try some smoked Siberian fish that could only be found in the Lake Baikal area. The smell of the fish was unmistakable. Not exactly smoky, not exactly fishy, and not exactly sweet. Kind of all three at the same time. Being surrounded and watched by all the babushkas, of course I had to try it. So Irkutsk is known as the gateway to Lake Baikal, the largest, oldest, deepest lake on Earth, and it's probably the most popular and most scenic part of our trip. Our private train took a detour onto a set of tracks that runs along the lake, and this is not used by the regular trains. And once we reached the 110-kilometer mark of the scenic railway, we had to stop, and a few of us brave souls were able to jump out and take a dip in the icy waters of Lake Baikal. And yes, obviously I was the first one in. And after our swim, of course, the crew had vodka shots lined up to warm us up, followed by an amazing barbecue party along the shores of the lake. After leaving the Lake Baikal region, I headed south to Ulaanbaatar, the capital of Mongolia. From there, it was about a 3-hour coach ride to the Taraj National Park, and here I spent some time at a camp experiencing an Adam demonstration showcasing some very important aspects of Mongolian culture. It's a national festival celebrating what Mongolians call the 3 games of men, from horseback riding to archery and wrestling. I also had the opportunity to spend some time with a local nomadic family, learning about their way of life. Also had some time here for horseback riding, hiking, and even stargazing before spending the night in my very own Mongolian yurt. In fact, everywhere you go in Mongolia, you see yurts, or gurs as they're known there. The word gur literally translates from the Mongolian language to mean house or home. For over 3,000 years, the Mongolian gur has been used by the nomads who constantly move from place to place in search of better pasture for their livestock. This was an amazing experience. There's a fireplace in the gur to keep you warm, and throughout the night they have someone coming in to keep the fire lit to make sure that you're warm throughout the night. There's a little mini solar panel with a battery pack so you can charge your devices, but this is absolutely a very unique experience, and I would highly recommend it to anyone heading to Mongolia. From Ulaanbaatar, I then headed to Beijing, and there I saw all the famous sites and monuments, such as the Great Wall of China, the Forbidden City, the Temple of Heaven, Tiananmen Square, and so much more. This city is just steeped in thousands of years of history. I happened to be in Beijing just a few days before the 70th anniversary of the People's Republic of China. It was an amazing sight to see all the preparation. The roads were closed, literally hundreds of buses bringing in military personnel for the parades. There were military vehicles parked all around. We even saw the Air Force rehearsing. So right above us, there were hundreds of helicopters, fighter jets, bombers, you name it. It just went on for a good 10-15 minutes of planes flying overhead. I like to believe they put on the show just to impress me because I was there. And if you think about this as well, Beijing is where our journey ends. But if we started the trip in Toronto, so I did start the trip in Toronto, and then returning to Toronto, after completing the trip, you would have just traveled all the way around the world. Now, I just want to finish this off with a few points on why this journey is unique and different from some of the standard Trans-Siberian programs out there. For one, this is a fully guided program. I had a multilingual tour director who oversees the entire train as well as provides commentary during the journey. There's also a designated group guide for every 26 passengers. And in each city, we also have local guides. Another unique aspect is the overnight stay in a traditional Mongolian yurt, or gur. Also, there's a doctor on board 24 hours a day. They take appointments or even drop-in consultations. So this is quite a different experience from the standard Trans-Siberian train, the public commuter train. This is a private train offering much more creature comforts than what you would find on some of the other trains.
So that's a few highlights of my trip, but there's just so much more to cover. If any of this interests you or you want to chat more about the experience, please reach out to me at alan.law@glpworldwide.com and I'll be happy to give you more details. Now, you're probably wondering more about, you want more information on the train itself, like what are the different categories, what kind of compartments are available, how's the food, how's the service, what are the bathrooms like? Well, the train itself isn't quite like the regular commuter trains, as I mentioned before. So I'll go over those details in a separate video. So please stay tuned and I'll definitely be back with more information on that. So until then, please feel free to comment below or reach out to me directly if you have any questions. And I really look forward to traveling with you soon.